So, Mom, when did you get into doing quilts?
Well, it was my mum that got into it first because we were in places where people did quilting. First at, like, in Epsom, I think, there were people who did crafts of various kinds, and Mum got into it more and more, and she got into the various things they did, like at Epsom College. They had all these wonderful classes, very cheap classes for women to learn cooking, and Mum sort of started it with just like how to make pastry or something like that, but she was very, very good at cooking, so given a bit of prodding and being shown lovely things that you could make, she got more adventurous. And being Mum, she always had to be the best in the class, of course, far better than anybody else. And when other people came up with questions, she had to ask better questions. And when somebody came up with, more interesting things to cook with pastry, she had to make even more interesting. Like if somebody was coming up with a French recipe, she would come up with the Belgian recipe, and of course at the end of the class there was all this lovely food to eat, and Mum would share it around or have a party after the class, so everybody knew that, this is going to be Anthea's food, this is going to be a really special thing, and we had parties too. I had a very wonderful 21st birthday party where it was all Mum's top quality, best possible foods. And we had quite a big table. It was completely covered with many, many beautiful dishes, beautifully decorated as well as everything. And so Mum hadn't got bored with cooking yet. And it was a wonderful party. And I wasn't at London Bible College yet, but I knew a lot of the students, and I invited them. And so it was very sumptuous, and the house was very beautifully decorated, and it was just a super special occasion. And I had friends from college and friends from school and friends from all over the place. So it was really a very special party. And I had the most beautiful new dress.
What was it like?
It was velvet. It was sort of that dark reddish purpley colour velvet, silk velvet. Mum made it, and I was pretty slender in those days. It was really lovely party. And I had one friend who was being a real pain, but I didn't take too much notice of that because everybody else was just having a spiffing time. Where was I going with this?
That's all right.
We were going to talk about quilting a little bit.
So did Lita take classes on quilting at that Epsom?
Yes, Lita did.
So I know she did quilting all through, for years and years and years. But then you started doing quilting when we were in
Well, I sort of despised the opportunities to do quilting at first.
I think you started when we were in Texas. And there was that wonderful quilt shop there.
It was before that, I think, gradually. Yeah. I did some very simple quilting. But then I I guess it was at Epsom College. Gosh, they had some brilliant teachers there. No, it was probably before that. But when you started to see all the different things that you could do, not just making blocks and sewing them together, which were very lovely, the ones that people did, but people began to do more adventurous things and also using more adventurous materials. And going with Mum to some of these places where they had the shops that sold the fabrics, and you began to fall in love with the fabrics and the colours and the textures and and Mum really wasn't. She was being very economical while trying to do many adventurous things with fabrics. And gradually I got to spend more and I got some very lovely fabrics. And you know, I mean, you can use 130 fabrics in quite an ordinary quilt. And so you can get fat quarters, which are small amounts of beautiful fabrics, and you can get them fat quarters or long thin ones, so that for the different shapes. But I bought a lot of lovely fabrics, and I mean, some of them I could bear to part with, some of them I never did part with. I still got quite a lot.
Do you remember like particular quilts? I know you and Joanna did that quilt class together in
Yes.
Texas.
We did a couple of book classes together in Texas.
Yes, we did. And we did sort of experimental things, and we did ones that where you do exactly what the teacher tells you, and your quilt turns out exactly the same as everybody else's, pretty much. But then I began to think that I kind of liked them when they weren't identical. And they were definitely the same idea. Geometrically, they had a lot in common, but they branched off from each other. And I began to get more excited about that. And also about what happens to the fabric when you've used it, that you get some fabrics that have interesting edges that are just the way they're sold, and people weren't using the interesting edges. And I started to use the selvages and make wonderful things with those. Well, I thought they were wonderful. I don't know if I don't think I ever made one that was really perfect. Some of Mum's friends made some that were so perfect you'd have to hunt with a magnifying glass to find any mistake, or you could count the threads and they were identical each direction, and just extraordinary detail work, and that's really not me.
You made a lot of like baby quilts and children's quilts. Do you want to talk about any of those, or why that you had the theme of like the Oh Baby Baby quilt?
Oh, the Oh Baby Baby, I loved that one. Yes, that was because there was
It was when you were little. It was a Christmas tree.
yes, was it in Argentina or was it in England?
It would have been Argentina, probably,
There was,
because you were very small.
yes, there was a Christmas tree. And yes, I was very small. I was maybe 2. I was really little. Maybe not 2 yet. I think I was not 2 yet. And
Hold on.